Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, 30 Microsoft Dynamics GP tips in 30 minutes, or at least we'll try to get this all done in 30 minutes. So just before we get started, a little bit of introduction. My name is Kathleen Wong, and I'm the marketing manager here at TGO. And here with me today as our presenter, I have Aaron Samuels, who is one of our business consultants here. So just before we get started, a few housekeeping items. All of your microphones are on mute right now so that we can reduce any background noise. But if you do have any questions regarding one of our tips, please feel free to put them into the GoToWebinar question box on the side of the screen, and we'll be answering them at the end of the presentation. When you do leave today's presentation, there will be a survey that pops up at the end. Please, please, please take the time to fill it in, as that helps us improve all of our future webinars. And just so you know, we will have a special offer at the end, so you may want to stay tuned for that. We will give us 1 minute and we'll get started shortly. Aaron's just finishing some stuff up. I see the first screen. Okay, over to Aaron.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aaron Samuel. I'm here to show you today 30 tips in 30 minutes. Some of these tips, hopefully you'll be able to take away and start using right today. Some of them may be just a reminder that they're here in GP. I will be going through a little bit of a PowerPoint presentation, and then I'll jump into GP and show you each one of these as I go along. As Kathleen had said, if you have any questions after the webinar today, we will have some time for questions and answers. So let's get started. We have a lot of information to cover. So the agenda today, we're going to be looking at first reporting, and then sales process, purchasing process, the GL, and then some general system shortcuts that we can use. So first under reporting, we're going to look at something called reporting service reports. So we always get the common question from all users, how do we take a report and actually export it to Excel? So these reports are really handy in exporting to Excel. They come out nice and formatted. You can use them in your everyday finance needs. The next thing is kind of a little known thing with Excel or with GP. It's called Excel dashboards. So these allow users to program some dashboards into your Excel files and actually pull information straight from GP into Excel. So these two reports are kind of little known ones, but they're great reporting tools. Then we'll look at some side menu navigation listings. So these are kind of some other ways to slice and dice your information in GP and get around using the GP program. GP reports, so using Find within an actual printed report. Changing your default printer location. So instead of it going to the printer every single time, you can change it so that it goes to the screen or vice versa. And then how to turn off a report from printing. So we all know when we do a purchasing or a sales posting, we end up with 5 or 6 reports that are printing off. So there is a way that you can turn these reports off so that they don't print. So the very first thing I'm going to talk about here is something called reporting service reports, or commonly known as SSRS reports. They're the same reports that you're used to using in GP. The advantage of using these reports, though, is that you can actually save them in Excel. So I'm going to flip into my GP environment here, and I'll go over how this is done. Oh, and I just closed my GP. That's not going to work out very well. So with the reporting service reports, before I get into show you how they're used, there is a little bit of setup that's required in order to get these deployed into your environment. So they do come with all GP installations, but you do have to set up the reports and actually deploy them into your GP environment. But once deployed, they are really handy and they're really useful, and like I said, they can be exported out into Excel. So to run these, you're going to see across the side menu here, and you'll see this in every single module. There's something called Reporting Service Reports. So when you click on this, it'll actually bring up a list of the reports that are available. In the newer versions of GP, you're going to see some KPIs and different metrics that are available to run like this, but you'll also see some standard GP reports. So I have to give my environment a second here to get going. Come on. And it never fails. As soon as everyone's eyes are on it, it takes forever to load. Here we go. So you'll see as soon as you click on Reporting Service Reports, you get a list of all these reports. Some of them are the standard reports in GP, so I'm going to flip right down to the bottom of this listing here. And you'll see the most common one here, the trial balance detail and the trial balance summary under the financial module. To run it, you're going to check mark it and then click on the View button. And the view opens up Internet Explorer. These reports are run through Internet Explorer. You're going to be prompted with a few different settings, and depending on the report that you're running, these settings will change based on that. So you can see as I select a few different settings here and then click up at the right corner for View Report, this will actually run my report and hopefully bring back data. So the nice thing about these reports is once you click on the floppy disk, and that really shows my age, you can see that you can actually export it into different types of formats. So we can take this out to PDF if you're giving it to your auditors or an external source, but we can also take it into Excel. And the nice thing about taking this into Excel is it's actually formatted and it's usable within the Excel program. So once it generates here, you can see our trial balance is formatted really nicely. Everything's just the same as a regular Excel file. And so those that are used to trying to take it out to the comma delimited or the tab delimited, you'll find this a lot easier to work with. The next thing that I wanted to show you here was the Excel dashboards. So GP does come built in with some Excel reports. So again, these just have to be deployed in your environment if you don't see the menu items already. If that's something you'd like done, please just contact TGO and we can help you through that. But you'll see that when I click on the Excel reports, we actually get prompted with a bunch of different Excel files that we can start using. In each one of the modules, you're going to see a dashboard that you can use, along with just some general Excel files that might be of interest to you. So I'm going to click on the financial dashboard just to quickly take a look at what this does. And again, you're going to click on the view, and this will open up Excel in this case. So here's some built-in dashboards to GP. They figure most people will like them. But how this works is behind the scenes, we actually have refreshable listings. And you can see this information, it just comes from GP. So to refresh your list, you're going to go up to Data, and you can click on Refresh. And what this will do is it'll reach into the SQL database, it'll pull out all the information that we're looking for in this Excel listing, and then once the listing has been refreshed, you can actually use regular Excel formulas and charts and graphs to create the dashboard that you're looking for. The other nice thing about using the Excel files, you don't need to actually have a user access into GP to run these. So any C-suite or directors or any managers who you do not want in GP, they can still use these Excel files. They can refresh them and keep them on their own desktop. The next step we'll look at is the side menu navigation list. So this is kind of a relatively, not relatively new, but in around GP 2013 that they released these. They're just different ways to slice and dice and look at information within GP. So you'll notice we're all used to our common view where we have our panes in front of us here. But each one of these menus down the side is a different way to slice and dice and look at information within GP. So if we take a look at our accounts, for example, this is going to give you a listing of your accounts. You'll notice on the right side of the screen here, we also have some of those SSRS reports. So these are KPIs, they're going to give you balances, they're going to give you statistics about those accounts. So when you click on an account, you can actually see some information across the bottom. You can see the current balance. You can also use across the top the menu bar quick ways to navigate through GP. So if you want to create a new account, you can click on the account button. It'll take you right to creating a new account. If you want to do fixed allocation accounts, unit accounts, you can kind of navigate that way. The other nice thing is when you flip into another module, say the sales module, and we click on customers, it's going to give you the same idea. It's going to slice and dice your customers. It'll give you some KPIs, but you can also see balances and you can see different information. So you'll notice that when I click on my customer here, across the bottom, I get snapshot information. So I can see what their balance is, what their credit limit is, what their payment terms, how often they pay, the last time they paid. We get some KPI graphs across the side here. So these can be copied into, copy the image and you can send it into an email or you can send it out to people. And again, across the top we can also see we have quick links for adding customers, maybe adding new orders or payments. We can also do filters on these. So if we only want to see a filter where a customer balance is not 0, when you click on the apply filter, it's going to filter our listing here and give you that filter. So now you know all these customers that are being presented here actually have a balance of greater than 0. So it's just a neat way to kind of navigate GP, get accustomed to it, and see information in a different way. The next thing is kind of a small little tip, but not a lot of people know about it. So using the find in a GP report. So what happens when you actually print the GP report to screen? And I'll just print a small one here to screen. So sometimes you may get a large report. It'll be a couple hundred pages. We definitely know with posting payables and sales batches, sometimes our reports can get up quite large. So across the top we actually do have a menu here, and the find here actually allows you to type in a customer ID, a vendor ID, or a certain number, and just like the find in Word and Excel, this will go down and actually find that information for you. So if I were trying to find, say, a certain period, period 4, and I click on OK, it's going to go down the report and it's actually going to find that information that I'm looking for. So this is really handy when you're doing posting journals and stuff like that. If you're looking for specific customers, specific transactions, you can actually just flip through that report and find information. Okay. The next tip I have here is the default printer location. So again, this kind of comes in with our reports. So a lot of the times if we'll notice that we click on print, it comes up and it's printing to the printer rather than the screen, and we keep on having to change the way that the printer is set. So again, if I just take up a simple report here and click on print, notice that mine always defaults to the screen. It's not defaulting to the printer. A lot of people, it will default to the printer, and you have to keep on selecting the screen. So in order to change this, you can click on the home page and you're going to go to User Preferences. Under our User Preferences, you'll see here the default report destination, and you can actually flip it from printer over to screen, click on OK, and now every report that you print will actually default to the screen rather than the printer. And to follow along with our reporting here, so again I had mentioned that you can actually turn off these reports that print when you do a posting. So the most common one is when we do a sales transaction posting or a purchasing transaction posting. We notice that we get 5 or 6 different reports that keep on printing, and you're having to constantly close them. So we can turn those reports off from printing. It doesn't mean that they're not generating. So behind the scenes, GP still generates that report. You can always reprint those reports. In the earlier versions, some of them are not reprintable. In the later version in 2016, every single report in GP can be reprinted. So to do this, we're going to navigate to the administration module. Maybe. Under Setup, scroll right down to the very bottom. Go to Posting. So this can be a very scary looking screen. What we want to do first is select our series. So I'm going to do this for the sales transaction entry. So we're going to select Sales. We're going to go down and select Sales Transaction Entry. Down at the bottom here is where you're going to find all your different reports. And here's where you can specify that you do not want some of the reports to print. You can also specify here which reports you want to go straight to a printer or which reports you want to go to the screen. So you can specify either or. So it's kind of handy to turn off those reports, save yourself time, especially if you're doing a lot of postings. You don't want to constantly close each one of those reports every single time. So once you've selected your reports that you do want to print, just click on OK. And the very next time that someone posts that batch, only those that have been selected will print. So that takes us through our reporting. The next thing we're going to look at is the sales process here. So under the sales process, I'm going to show you that there's a new setting. It's in the newer version of GP, I believe it was 2016, that allows you to deposit every cash receipt. The next one, they've introduced a new thing called the Customer All-in-One Viewer, so I'll show you what that does. When you're doing a cash receipt, we get the question a lot of the times, maybe you know the sales document number, but you don't know what customer it was actually for. So how can you do a cash receipt by the document number rather than the customer? I'm going to show you a little bit in the advanced lookup filtering. So when we're looking at the customer lookup, how can we change that lookup window a little bit? In the newer version, they've introduced changing the customer ID, so there's a customer combiner and modifier, and then how to write off an unpaid balance at a cash receipt. So the very first one we hear is it's a newer setting. It's 2015 R2 is when they deployed it, and so this is to bypass the deposit process in GP. So if we remember, every time we do a cash receipt in GP, the next step we need to do is actually tell GP that this money has been taken to the bank and it's actually been deposited. So we do the bank deposit process. There is a setting here where we can automatically post a cash receipt to the deposits. So what this does is it gets rid of that deposit process, and it will automatically bypass that and flow into your cash receipt or into your bank reconciliation. So in order to set the setting, you're going to go to the Administration module, Setup, and Company. So under Company, you're going to go down to Options, and this is where we see all of our setup options for our company. And the very last one we have here is Automatically Post Cash Receipts. So this is a really good thing if you have lots of cash receipts that are coming in and you don't want to do that bank deposit process every single day or every single time. The one caveat is to remember that this will actually post right through. So it means that for every cash receipt that you do, you will see a separate transaction in your bank reconciliation module. So you kind of have to weigh that pros and cons, that process timing, to see if you're going to save it on the bank deposit. You're going to take up a little bit more time in your bank reconciliation. So once that's been selected, again, every time you do a sales cash receipt, it will just flow straight to the bank reconciliation module. You don't need to do that bank deposit. The next one we have is something called the Customer All-in-One Viewer. So this is a new tool that Microsoft released in 2015, R2. What this allows you to do is now view sales transactions. You can view the transactions, the orders, the quotes, the invoices, any cash receipts, and returns or credits against that same process. So it organizes it so that you can see everything all in one spot, dealing with a single path or a single transaction throughout GP. So if we go into our GP program here, this is going to be located under the Sales Inquiry, and you're going to go down to Sales All-in-One View. So it's quite a large window, but what it allows us to do is to select the customer here. And when you select the customer, you can now see this quote here. So if we select our quote, we can actually drill down and see what that quote was. But you can also checkmark the quote, and what it will do is it will order the rest of the columns based on that quote. Then it flowed into an order, did it flow into an invoice, what cash receipts went against this quote, and were there any credits or returns. Again, if I select the next one here, I can see whether or not there was any information. You can do this actually flowing across, so while I had no orders, maybe I have an invoice here. If I click on the invoice, I can then see if there were any cash receipts or any credits or returns. So it just allows you to quickly see the history or the process that was happening with any type of invoice going through GP. The next one I have here is how to enter in a cash receipt by document number rather than by the customer ID. So you can tell that this was a kind of an earlier process, but we still get the question a lot of the time. So when we're doing a cash receipt, you're going to click on the cash receipt window here. So instead of selecting your customer ID first, you'll notice on the right side of the screen here, it actually has locate customer by document number. So by clicking on the magnifying glass, you can now see all of the outstanding invoices. You can select the invoice, and it will automatically select the customer here for you that way. So it's kind of a backwards way of figuring out who was the customer for an invoice number. You'll notice that if you do select the customer ID first, that gets grayed out automatically. It's assuming you already know who the customer is, so you don't need to do that. The next thing I have here is the advanced lookups. So the advanced lookup, or what a lookup window is when we're trying to find our customer. So I'm going to go to transactions by customer just so I can get to the lookup window. And what we mean by the lookup window is when you click on the magnifying glass to actually try and find your customer, this is our lookup window. So a lot of people know that you can click on the customer ID and you can type in the customer ID here and it will search, or you can click in the customer name, sort the listing by the customer name. But there's two other additional ways that you can do sorts within this window. So the first way, you'll notice that on the right side, this additional sorts. If you click on the drop down here, it actually gives you some other ways to sort these customers. So maybe you have your customer class and you want to see your customers organized by the customer class. The nice thing about this is when you actually select the customer class, your find then becomes that customer class. So you can say, find me the customer class such and such. Or you can change the sort down by salespeople. So maybe you're looking for customers, but you only know them by the salesperson ID. Again, you can use the find by salesperson ID at that point. So there's a few of them here that you can see, but there's also a custom sort where you can then take any field that you're trying to sort your customers by, insert that in, and it will order your customers by that. So maybe we want to see our customers by the currency ID. We can click Insert, click OK, and it will now order your customers by the currency ID. Another way that you can utilize this lookup window a little easier, clicking on the other drop down here right by View All. So we can see that right now it's been selected to all customers, but we can say by customer address. So now we're looking by customer by their address. Click on the drop down again, and we can check mark exclude inactive customers. So maybe the list you have quite a series of inactive customers that you don't want to see. By check marking that, it will actually exclude them all. Another way that you can do it is through an additional sort. Again, this is the same as going up to additional sorts there. Or you can use a favorites. And these are actually the favorites that are programmed in SmartList. So if you were to go into SmartList and create a listing of your customers in exactly the way that you want to see them, you can change your listing here based on that SmartList. So when you click on favorites, it'll look at what SmartList you have under the customers, and then you can say sort based on that SmartList. So maybe I want to see based on customer balance. It will now search my records based on the customer balance. If you want to go back to the beginning again, you can click on all customers and it will take you back to the beginning. Now the nice thing about this is if you do come up with the way that you want to see this window sorted all the time, you can click on set this as the default view, and it means every time you close and open the window, it will go back to that way to view. And it's a personal setting, it won't affect anybody else's way they search their customers. The next tip we have here is the change customer ID. So this is we all know that this was in here with Pistol before, so the professional service tool library. But in the later releases, Microsoft has actually added this in as a utility where we can use the customer combiner and modifier. So the combiner and modifier allows us to select, say, a customer ID, and we can change the customer or we can modify the customer. So if I click on modify here, excuse me, we see that we can take a customer ID and we can actually change the ID on it. Once we click on process, it will transfer all of the history. It'll actually just change that customer ID. You can also combine two customers together, so maybe two of your customers have merged together. You want to merge all that history together. You can have your source customer and your destination customer. And what it will do is it will merge all the history of those two customers together into one single account. The only caveat you have to remember with this, you do have to be SA or you have to be Dyna SA in order to use this. And the next tip I have is writing off documents at the time that you do the cash receipt. So a lot of times people will come in and will notice that they still have 1 and 2 cent receivables left. And in order to get rid of it, they're doing debit memos and credit memos and trying to play around with that. So one thing that you can do and you can allow your staff to do, at the time that they do a cash receipt, let me select another customer here. At the time they are doing a cash receipt and they go to apply that to the invoice, they'll notice that there is a little bit of the invoice that might be left over. So there's 93 cents left on this invoice here. The second line that you have down here, you'll notice that there is a write-off. So you can actually write off those remaining balances right at the cash receipt stage. So this will take it to a predefined write-off account, either set at the system level or set at the customer level. And in that way, it doesn't leave that pesky few cents or that pesky dollar left over on that invoice waiting to be received. You're never going to collect it from the customer. You might as well write it off right away. As soon as you click OK and you save this transaction and post it, it'll actually write that document off, show it as fully received, and then take that balance into that specified account. The next one we're going to flow into is the purchasing here. So we're going to look at setting up multiple purchasing accounts on a vendor card. Again, there's a all-in-one viewer under the purchasing module, so we'll take a quick look at this. To change the vendor ID, so under the purchasing side, we have a combiner and a modifier as well. Vendor payment options, we'll take a quick look at those. We'll look at how to hold on to one document from being paid. So maybe there's one document that's in this dispute with a vendor. How do you put that document on hold so it never actually gets paid? And then how to print a check on the fly. So the very first thing, very common question I get is how do we assign an account, an expense account to a vendor? And then sometimes you may have a supply vendor or something like that where you actually have multiple accounts that you use quite frequently on that with that customer, or sorry, with that vendor. So if we take a look at the vendor card, and we go down to accounts here, we know that you can go under the purchases and you can default the purchase account that's going to pop up every time we use this vendor in a transaction. But right over on the right hand side, you'll see three little dots or an ellipsis. If we click on that ellipsis, we can actually see a screen where we can default more than one account. When we do this, you can default it on the transaction or you can leave it so it's not defaulted. If you don't default it on the transaction, what that means is it's not going to come up on the transaction, but when your users click on the magnifying glass, they will only have the listing of those accounts that are there. They won't see the rest of the GL. So since I've defaulted these three accounts, when I actually go and I do a transaction, those three accounts will now default onto the transaction. So when I click on distributions, you'll notice that all three accounts popped up and it defaulted the purchase to the first account. So you can move this in any which way you want and spread out that purchase across those accounts. You can also leave accounts as 0, so you don't have to put an amount in on the account. What will happen is GP will disregard that account on posting and it'll get rid of it out of that routine. So once you've spread your purchases across what you need to, click on OK, and then you can post that transaction. So it's a handy way to have accounts default that you commonly use with that vendor, even if it's more than one. The next step we're going to look at is the all-in-one vendor viewer. So again, this is very much the same as what we were seeing in the sales side. So if we click under Inquiry and Purchasing All-in-One, this will give us the same view as it was giving for the customers, but this time it's going to look on the vendor side. So if we click on our vendor here, we can see purchase orders that then turned into a receipt, that turned into an invoice, turned into the payments and returns that you've done. So again, if we want to take a look at this purchase order, we can select that. We can see any receipts or invoices that have come in against it. If we click this purchase order, we can see anything across. And vice versa, if we click on the receipts, we can see the information that's coming across board as well. Much the same in the sales side, we have the we have the vendor, combiner, and modifier. So under utilities here, we have our vendor, combiner, and modifier. It works very much the same as on the sales side. You have your source vendor ID, you have your destination vendor ID. You can select to combine two accounts, so maybe two vendors have merged. The most famous one is kind of Staples and Business Depot. Or you have vendor modifier here, so maybe your vendor has changed their name and you want to change their vendor ID to better suit what their new name is. So once you've selected your source and destination, click on Process. It will join all those records together, or it will change the vendor ID, and away you go. Vendor payment options. So creating a check run sometimes can be kind of a tedious process, deciding which vendors actually get paid and which priority. So a little known setting that you can use to help aid you in this process is the actual vendor payment priority. So when you're in setting up a vendor ID, and we click on options here, what you will see is a field here called the vendor payment priority. And this can be anywhere from 1 to 99, it can be A, B, C, D, E. You're using it as some sort of payment priority to group your vendors together. So this will help you say that you want to pay employees first, so employees are a 1, utilities might be a 2, and then everyone else is a 3. So once you've categorized your payment priority here, when you're doing your check run and you click on Build Batch or Select Checks here, one of the options for selecting your batch one of the options here for your restrictions is the actual payment priority. So we can say that we want all vendors that have that payment priority of 1 or 1 and 2, depending on the size of the check run you want. Click on Insert, and then when you click Build Batch, it will only bring in payables for those vendors which are a high priority. And then you can go along, you can take a look and see how much money it actually brought in, and this step can be done as many times as you need to. So once you validate what the total is that you need to pay, you can then say payment priority number 2, add to batch, and it will add that second layer of vendors or the third layer of vendors so that you know how much your check run is getting up to, and you can kind of run through the payment priorities. A lot of the times you may have an invoice that's in dispute with your vendor and you don't want to accidentally pay that invoice. So we know that we can put an entire vendor on hold, but when you put an entire vendor on hold, none of the invoices will get paid. So there is a way that you can put one invoice on hold for a particular vendor. So in our purchasing under transactions here, we'll see the one setting here called holds. So holds allows you to select a vendor. And when you select that vendor, you'll notice that you can see all the invoices that are currently outstanding. And we can actually hold those select invoices. Once you click OK, what that means is that when your payables clerk goes in to create the check run, they are unable to pay those invoices. They won't even show up. They won't be an option to actually get paid. So until this dispute's been settled or you're ready to actually pay that invoice, you can go back in, you can select that vendor, and you can take those invoices off hold. Click OK again, and they'll be ready to be paid with the next check run. We get a lot of questions about the payable transactions entry window. On the right side, you'll notice that there's actually three fields, cash, check, and credit card. And what does this actually do? So this is something called printing checks on the fly or doing a payment on the fly. And it allows you that when you're doing a transaction entry, you can mark that transaction as being paid, or you may have someone standing at your desk that's looking for a check right away for an invoice that you're entering. So to use these fields, when you're doing your entry, you're going to go down the side here and you'll decide whether you're paying by cash, so maybe it was a direct withdrawal from your bank account. If you actually need to print the check right away, then you can put it on our check. Or if it was paid by a credit card that's been set up in GP, you can pay by the credit card. So to actually print the check, because you have someone bugging you right beside you and they need that check right away, we can enter in the amount of the check, click on the tab. What this is going to do is open up a window and ask you which bank account this check is actually getting printed from. It will show you the next good check number. It will give you the date that this check is going to be for and the payment number. So once these are okay and you've validated everything's good, you can click on OK. And then you can click on the print check. And by clicking on print check, this will allow you to actually print the check and give that check out to that person that's standing at your desk. Notice that after that check has been printed, you can't go back in and edit how much that transaction was actually for. So you can add to the transaction, but it will default, or it'll highlight this and make it not changeable because the check's already been printed. You can't change how much that check was actually printed for. When you do post this, you will get a check register and you'll notice that the check is actually showing up on that check register. So this is called a payment on the fly. We can do the same thing with cash to say it's been directly withdrawn from the bank account, or you can pay it by the credit card right away. Oops. You'll notice that it is secure, so because I did print the check, it's going to make me actually save this and then post that batch. So there's no way to print the check and then delete the transaction after. Okay, we're going to flow into the general ledger here. So we're going to take a look at a newer feature, a really exciting one called copy and paste. So a lot of people were asking for this and Microsoft finally answered. Definitely how to do reoccurring batches. So many of you may know reoccurring batches, but maybe those amounts change every single month or every period and you need to actually clear those balances. There's a thing here called account rollup, so we'll take a quick look at that. Again, account view in the lookup, so how to do some of the advanced lookups or the changes when you're looking at accounts. How to work with our calendars quickly and a tool for reconciling to the GL. So one of the things that you'll see here, and this was released in 2013 R2, is copy and paste. So in our financial module, under our general ledger transactions, oops, how about we go under our general ledger transactions. So you'll see in this release that we do have a paste from Excel. So after you set your entry up, you come down to your account, you're going to select your first account here, and in Excel it needs to be set up so that we have description, account, debit, and credit. So you're going to change all of your working files, all of your month-end files so that it spits out a journal entry in this format. You're going to highlight only the transaction itself, not the headers. Click on Control-C, File Edit Copy, right-click Copy, whichever you're used to. Go into GP and then click on Paste. And you'll notice that this pastes in that journal entry for us. And then we can also see that it gave us the description as well. So this is really nice. You can copy in as many lines as there are in Excel and as many lines as GP will take for a journal entry. The only caveat, you can't do it more than once in the same transaction. So once I click paste, that's the end of it. I have to move on to a new transaction to use the paste feature again. The next tip we have here is how to do a reoccurring batch with no values. So again, you might be used to doing reoccurring batches. You set them up and you use them every single month. But maybe your amounts change every single month. So when you're creating your general ledger batch, this is the opportunity that you have to do a monthly batch. And under the frequency here is where you can set up whether it's going to be weekly, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, or monthly. But you'll notice that as soon as you select your frequency here, you had clear reoccurring amounts that actually illuminated. So what this allows you to do is if this is selected, any transaction that you put in this batch, while you can post it monthly for a number of months in a row, it'll clear out the amounts that are set in that batch. The accounts will still be there, but when you go into the transaction, the amounts will actually be zero, and you have to enter in those amounts every single time. So it allows you to not accidentally post the same transactions month after month. It forces you to go in and have to take a look at the transactions and actually enter in those amounts. The next one that we have here is something called account rollups. So an account rollup allows you to quickly look at a series of accounts that you always group together and see what the balance is, maybe see what the budget amount was and what the variance to that budget was. So the common use for this is maybe you have expenses that go together, salaries, payroll, cash, something along that lines that you always group those accounts together. So in my example here, we're going to go under Inquiry and then under Account Rollup. So when you're setting up an account rollup, you're going to come in here and you're going to click on Modify. So I do have one that's set up already. This one's called Salary. So you're allowed up to 4 columns. It's kind of like a little mini report. So 3 columns I have here. The first one is the actuals, the second one is the budget, and then it allows you to do a very basic calculation column. So this is my budget to actuals variance. You can see down at the bottom here what we're going to do is specify whether it's a division, an account, or a department. At this point I said it was an account, and the account range I wanted was 5100 all the way down to 5170. I always group this range of accounts together. So you'll see that you need a range of accounts that are side by side, or you can insert, you can click on Insert and insert random accounts that go together. So once you have your account listing down here, click on Save. And what this is going to do is allow you to have your option ID, so we can click on that, find the grouping of accounts that you've put together, and then you're going to see the roll-up of those accounts. So for period 1, I can see what the balance is of all those accounts together, what the budget was, and quickly what a variance analysis is. If you want to drill down, you highlight that period, click on Actuals, and then it's going to show you the individual balances for those accounts that have been put together. So it's a quick and easy way to group your accounts together into common account groupings and take a look at the balances. So again, as we were doing in the sales lookup and the vendor lookup, under the account lookup you can do the same changes, or the advanced lookups. So again, when we're in this window, remember on the side here, on the right side, we have additional sorts. So maybe you know what your categories are, maybe you know what the types are, so a unit account versus a fixed allocation account. A lot of the times people are wondering what this alias is used for. So this is a common use for alias, where you can group accounts together by a short name or a name that they're actually, another name that they're known by. So again, using this sort here will change the way that you're looking or searching through your accounts. Again, the same as the sales and the vendor lookup. If we click up here on the top left-hand corner, we can only specify accounts that are in sales or purchasing or inventory control. So remember, when we're looking at an account setup, you specify which series to actually include that account in. So you can kind of group those accounts together when you're in a lookup window and specify that you're only looking for that series of accounts. Again, under favorites, you can use a smart list. So any smart list that you have under accounts, you can pull in here and view your account listing based on that. How to quickly navigate your calendar. So when we're taking a look at our calendars here, so we might go into detail here and we're taking a look at one of our accounts, and we click on the calendar button. So I've seen it quite often. It's actually kind of funny. People that are flipping through months and days and years will stay here and they'll click back and forth time and time again. When you're working with the account with the calendar in GP, you can always click on the date at the very top. This will drill you out into a monthly view. When you click on the date again, it will drill you out into a yearly view. If you click one more time, it'll actually take you out into a higher view. Then you can just drill back down on the months that you need and get right to the day that you're looking for. If you ever get lost in this lookup, down on the bottom it'll actually tell you what today's date is. If you want to quickly default in today's date, you can click on today and it will default your calendar to today's date. Reconcile to GL. So this is a little used tool, but it has great advantages and great power. So a lot of the times you may find when you're doing your month-end reconciliation that your subledger is out from your GL control account. So your bank module or your sales historical age trial balance is out from the sales AR or the AP account. So under the financial module, when you go under routines, you'll notice this reconcile to GL. So this will open up. It'll allow you to select the time period that you're trying to reconcile. So hopefully you're reconciling every month. If not, you can spread this out over 2 or more months. Select the module that you're trying to reconcile. So in this case, we're doing payables management, but you can do receivables, inventory, and bank. When you select your module, it will show you the control accounts that are assigned in that module. So if those are correct, you'll leave this alone, but you can add more accounts if you're looking for, or you can remove accounts. Once you have your settings set up here, you're then going to dictate where this gets outputted to. So it actually creates an Excel file for us. So we're going to say that we're going to take this right to the desktop and then click on Process. What this is going to do is create an Excel file for us. And the Excel file has the subledger on one side, it has the GL on the other side, and you'll see it goes along and it matches our transactions for us. If there's any potentially matched transactions, so maybe the date is different, what it was posted in the subledger to when it was posted in the GL, or completely unmatched, so it has no idea why one transaction's in either one of them and not in the other side. So this is a good starting point to try and figure out what transactions, definitely under unmatched, went through your subledger or went through your GL and then go through the other side. The nice thing about this report as well, anything that's highlighted in blue you can click on, and this will drill back into GP and actually open up an inquiry window looking at the journal entry if you're looking on the general ledger side, or on the subledger side you can actually open up the documents, and it'll help aid in your investigation. This is a regular Excel file. You can click save it to your desktop, save it somewhere on your network, and come back to it at any point. It does save this, so you can come back in here at any time, look up your reconciliation number, click on Excel. It'll open up that Excel file for you. So system customization. So how to change the menu layout. We're going to look at how to highlight required fields, how to add shortcuts to the top menu bar, and also how to add shortcuts to the side menu bar. How to create a task, so tasks for other people or other users in the system. And as always, I like to cover off our help file. GP has a really great help index and how to utilize that properly. So the very first one here in 2013 R2, GP or Microsoft changed the way that you can change your menu, the way the menus look. So what I mean by that is when we actually open up a transaction, you'll notice across the top that we have large icons with the menu underneath it. You can change those. So if you come from GP from a long time ago, there used to only be menu items. They didn't have icons. So if we go and click on Home and go up to User Preferences, you'll notice here that we have a Windows command display. And click on the drop-down and you have 3 options. So the action pane is what I've been using now, so they're large icons with the menu underneath. The action pane strip will actually reduce those icons into a smaller size. It'll still give you the menu. Or you can do menu bar. By selecting menu bar, it gets rid of those icons and all you will see is the menu. So some people like this because your windows will kind of function a little bit better. It gives you a little bit more usable space, especially if you have a smaller monitor. You might want to just change it to the menu you're not wasting monitor space with pretty pictures across the top. When you do change this, you do have to restart GP in order for it to take effect. The next thing we'll look at is how to highlight or change the color of the required fields in GP. So you'll notice that when I'm in any of my transactions or any forms, that the required fields in that form are actually in red, they're highlighted, and they're underlined. Anything that's a link to another form or another window within GP is highlighted in blue and it's underlined as well. So in your user preferences, once you click on Home and you go to User Preferences again, we have something called Display. And when you click on the Display tab, the window will open up, hopefully. Here we go. So the window will open up and this is where you can change those settings. So a link field again is anything that you drill down on or you click and it takes you somewhere else in GP. So we can change this to blue and we can leave it as underline. Anything that's a required field, we can change to red. And then you can also bold, or you can italic, or you can do bold italic. So when you click on Apply, it'll give you a brief outline of what your new windows will look like. So you can see anything that's a link will be blue and underline, and then if it's required, it's now in italics, and it's bold, and it's the color red. So now you know specifically what fields are required in that window in order to click Save and move on or close the window. So once you've set your settings, just click on OK, and those settings will take effect right away. So once you get to use GP quite frequently, there may be windows that you use specifically and you use quite often. So instead of having to navigate all the way through GP to get those windows, you may want to create a quick shortcut across the top menu bar. So you'll notice here that I do have two little icons. And so when I click on the customer maintenance, it gives me my customer window right away. I don't have to navigate to that module. So in order to set these, you're going to right click on the menu bar and you're going to come down to Customize. Now this is actually called the custom menu bar. So if I get rid of that, you'll notice that those go away. If I activate it, it's actually going to give me my menu bar. So I'm going to customize that menu bar. So we're going to click on that. We're going to go to Custom and then click on Add. Now this is going to allow you to add any Microsoft GP window, transactions, inquiry, cards. So maybe we want the vendor card because we use vendors quite often. So we're going to go to Purchasing, click on Vendor, click OK, and we now have a new card that's up there. So now we have customer maintenance and we have vendor maintenance. So you can quickly navigate to those windows that you use quite often without having to navigate through the modules. Another way to do that, instead of putting it across the top menu bar here, you can use the side menu bar here. So shortcuts on the side menu, we can add windows, we can add smart lists, we can add macros. You can also add an external web page or an external shortcut. So on this home page, if you right click over in the menu here, you'll notice the add. And you see that you can add any one of those. So I'm going to add an external shortcut. So maybe I work with a budget quite often. Click on Browse. This is going to allow me to go out and navigate and find the file that I'm trying to add. We can even assign it down at the bottom here to a keyboard shortcut. So you can do anything from F2 all the way up to F12. Once it's been assigned, obviously you can assign it to more than one. So once you have your file located, click on Add and Done, and you'll notice that I have my budget file there now. When I click on that, it's going to open up Excel, it'll open up my budget for me, and it's going to open up that external file. And you can add any file that you need to, that you want to use, as long as your system can open it. Again, if we go back to the ad, we see that we can add a web page. So if you click on add, it's going to ask you for the address. So maybe you quite frequently go to your bank's website or you go to the Bank of Canada. You can add those websites there and quickly click on them and have those external links. And last but not least, if you forget everything that I've talked about here today, we have our help file. So I always like to reaffirm the help every time we talk about GP. So the help in GP is very, very useful. If we go into a window, let's say we're going into the general journal transactions, and you completely forget how to enter in or use that part of GP. Click on the help, which is always over in the top right, and you're going to notice that there's something here called About This Window. So when you click on About This Window, it's going to open up the information about that window, about that specific process in GP. And you can see that there's items for this. So say you want to enter in a standard or reversing transaction. Once you click on that, it will give you a step-by-step guide on how to use that process or enter that transaction into GP. Okay. So I just want to turn it back over to Kathleen. Before I do that, I want to say thank you to everyone. Hopefully there were a few new tips there that you can take away and start using with your GP today.
Thank you, Erin. So I know we went over just by a little bit, but if you would like us to send you the full webinar recording or the slides, there is a note when you exit in the survey, and you can just let us know and we'll be sure to send those over to you. Okay, so on to our special offer. We are offering 45 days of TGO's Unlimited Financial Systems Assurance for free. So what exactly is TGO's Assurance Plan? The TGO Financial Systems Assurance Plan provides you and your organization with unlimited support for your systems, including but not limited to Microsoft Dynamics GP. We can also support any of your third-party add-ons that you may have if you choose so. For those of you who are unfamiliar with TGO, we do actually have an in-house support team that is solely dedicated to our clients on assurance. They are your one-stop shop for any issues or troubleshooting that you may have within your system. So how can you qualify? So just to put out first, this offer is available for anybody not currently on a TGO assurance plan. And in order for us to be able to get you on our free trial, you do need to meet with one of our consultants for an hour or two, just so they can understand a little bit about your system, so that we can provide you the support that you need. And at the end of this 1 to 2 hour review, we will develop a customized support plan tailored to your specific requirements. And before we get into any questions, our team will be reaching out to everyone who attended shortly. Okay, so I know we did go over, so if you have any questions, you can contact us. You can actually just respond to the email that gets sent out after this webinar, or make your comments in the survey. If not, I just want to thank everybody for coming out today, and I apologize for going over. We will stay on here for a little bit of time, just if anybody has any questions or comments. Okay, so I do have a question from Haresh. Hi, is it possible for you to share this PowerPoint afterwards? Yes, we can. Just make a note when you're exiting in the survey, and we'll be sure to send it to you. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Erin, today for coming out and hearing our 30 tips. If you do have any questions, feel free to contact us, or we will be contacting you shortly about our special offer. Have a good day, everybody.